Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Tom Wells here. Today is Friday, June the 15th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for this last weekday of the week, Friday, the day everybody looks for, the day when people say, hey, at the end of this day, I'm on the weekend, hooray! And so we're celebrating along with them, and we were talking just before the podcast about stuff going on in our lives and agreeing the law of attraction is just freaking amazing. There's just no other way to describe it. I mean, you focus on stuff and boom, it just shoves more stuff like that your way almost instantly. I mean, right before the podcast we were talking, I got a phone call from someone who was looking for help to solve a problem immediately after I was working on solving a problem. More problems sent my way. I mean, you got to be kidding me. This is like instant reaction. Unbelievable. So how are you doing, Tom?
Well, I think I'm doing really good. We'll find out on the podcast. No.
Oh, okay.
Well, because the topic that I chose today is definitely a topic I have a charge around. So it's going to be interesting to see.
But you agree with me though.
I'm counting on you to be my very stalwart co-host who then whenever I start drifting into the land of not knowing, you'll bring me back.
Okay, I'll pull you back. Okay,
and say, well, Tom, what about this? Which I'm supposed to be the coach, and so I'm supposed to know all that stuff. But the coach sometimes doesn't know everything. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, that's one thing I learned from Louise. I mean, when she was a therapist, I mean, every therapist has somebody who they don't call it a coach. I think they call it a supervisor, right. But essentially somebody else to talk to about their difficult cases, some things that come up in their own lives, all this kind of stuff. Everybody needs that kind of help at times,
Well, it's so funny. When I was getting trained in coaching, I remember one thing they would say is that the coach is always just a few steps ahead of the client, and that's about the best you can hope for. That in a way, like we're all constantly transforming and learning, and contrast is just the way that we learn on this planet Earth, And so if there isn't contrast coming out of what we're doing, then maybe we're not growing, I mean, there's always contrast there.
Well, there's always the law of attraction. I mean, the law of attraction literally brings everything into our lives. And I think that's what we're really noticing. The more that we get into this, the more that we study this, the more we notice all the ways it actually gets into our lives.
Well, maybe that's true. Yeah. I mean, that is true. Yeah. Become more sensitive to seeing it. The thought, before the thought turns into the reality, before the thought that we're thinking manifests the thing, sometimes we're seeing that connection really quickly. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. The times can vary, but often it's very, very quick. And more so, not so much that it's quick, just that we notice it. I mean, so much of what happens in life, we don't notice the connections. And very often we can't even follow all the connections because there are just too many of them. It's like, where does that thread come from? Who knows? God only knows. It's a tangle in there, But nevertheless, we know the threads must be there theoretically. So, they're there. It's just, can you follow them? Sometimes we can. Most of the time we can't. What we do know, though, is the more that we look at it, the more we see, wow, the serendipities just keep coming. The synchronicities just keep coming. The stuff that by previous knowledge shouldn't have happened continue to happen. Yeah, so it's just an ongoing learning experience. And that's good. I mean, like you said, that's part of our personal expansion, is how we're learning how all this stuff fits together and applying it and learning some more and applying it and learning some more and applying it. It's like it's the road that never ends, right?
Yeah, it is, because the only thing that actually exists, and this is the funny thing that in this whole conversation that I'm bringing up today, which is about psychotherapy and this whole question. Well, anyway, I won't get into the whole explanation of it right away, but I just want to add to what you're saying, is that this idea of that we are really only living in the present moment means that all the thoughts we have about our lives are actually being molded moment by moment. So whether we think it's happening from some past association or whatever, what we set up yesterday or what we set up when we were babies, it's all happening right in this moment, and it's actually being created right in this moment. That's the funny thing. We're the
Oh, yeah.
creators of it. We're the creators of it.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and so 3D reality is, I mean, some say in the quantum world that, and we've talked about this before, that even the very things your eyes are seeing and your ears are hearing right now, you're creating them. Somehow you're creating them. And so everyone's reality is unique to them, but it's always in their control. It's
I
always in
keep
our.
I keep coming back to what Joel told me the other day, and he reiterated it during yesterday's podcast, that he has a good friend who is a complete skeptic where the law of attraction is concerned. This is a guy in the psychology field, that general field. I'm not sure exactly what he does.
Uh-huh.
And recently, he kind of tried to pin Joel down and basically confront him on his crazy ideas about the law of attraction, and say to him, yeah, but what you don't seem to understand is that the only reason that all these things you talk about, law of attraction and placebo effect and all that, it only happens because you believe it. And Joel says, exactly. That's exactly it.
Right. It only happens, and so does all the psychological things. Well, should I dive into this topic?
Yeah, sure. Let's go for it. I mean, we've already been talking about psychotherapy to a degree. We might as well get into it,
Okay. Well, here's the thing. When we get into it, what I notice is that if I start talking in this direction, I lend credibility to it. I lend energy to it. I lend vibration to it. So, let's keep that in mind, that we're spinning this web. As we talk about it, we're spinning a web. And then, our challenge or our opportunity in this podcast is to see if we can spin the other web of understanding it from the point of view of law of attraction. So, because I find this web to be very powerful, and I'm going to read a little blurb I got yesterday from a friend of mine she's a grief counselor, psychotherapy grief counselor, and she works with things like PTSD and trauma and things like that. And she's putting on a free workshop that I might actually go and just listen to her, because I really love this woman, and I really am fascinated because of things that I'm going through right now in my life, in this new relationship I'm in, are really bringing up this stuff, and I'm trying to understand it from law of attraction, whereas the woman that I'm spending time with has for many years been a Jungian therapist, and she understands things a lot from that point of view. And she has a very broad perspective on all kinds of things, but it's really interesting spending time with someone who has that perspective, because I find that it colors my perspective a lot, or it brings up the parts of me that haven't yet resolved this question about the very thing I'm going to read to you about here, what this woman says in her blurb. Now, okay, she starts with a quote from Joseph Campbell, where he says, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasures you seek." Archetypes, PTSD, sibling and family relationships. Now, this is her words. Archetypes, PTSD, sibling and family relationships, our evolutionary brain all play a part in these go-to responses that no longer serve our needs, let alone our creative desires. Yet, we are prisoners, only while we look away, as the chains are of our own making, and we have many options when we just face the chains. Subconscious and semi-conscious fears act in the background to suppress us from trying for things we want, or drive us to unhealthy, even very self-destructive behaviors. Shame, guilt, even just uncertainty stop us from even looking deeper, leaving us at the mercy of these unspoken, unseen, unacknowledged drivers of our lives. Shadow work is about learning to not only look at the inner demons, but to understand them and handle them instead of being manhandled by them. It's not for the faint of heart. Often past traumas emerge as root causes, unleashing some pretty vulnerable feelings, anger, regret, and shame, but also unlocking the mystery of why, which has the keys to dismantle the automatic response and allow you to grow beyond these instinctive responses. So right there is a painting of a picture of psychotherapy and psychiatry.
Sure. Yeah.
And so what I find is that it's a seductive way for me of trying to then say, well, if I've been struggling with something for a really long time, say, like how to have, I've been sort of struggling since I was 33 years old on how to have the career of my dreams. How do I do the work I really want to do in the world and be successful at it?
Right.
And in a
Yep.
way, I'm still sort of struggling, although I've made a huge progress. It's taken me since I was 33. And of course, I took so many detours along the way that were just fine with me. I worked the same job for 30 years, and in a way that was just fine with me. I wasn't like always in angst about, oh, how will I ever do my ideal career? But once I got out of that business ended, and then I said, okay, this is the last part of my life. I'm 61 years old. I'm going to completely do what I want with my life. That was 8 years ago. Well, I've created a business since then. I'm a life coach. I've studied 3 forms of life coaching, and 2 of those forms use the psychological model, very strongly use this model. And also all the work I did with shaman from, say, about the year 2009 till about 2015, I was working with shaman, and they also, go into this world of the dark shadow world of the unconscious. That's where they ply their trade, you might say, in the dream time, and going into that world in order to help people release these deep demons, that might be lurking in the shadows, so that the person can be healed. So there's this idea that, something's broken, something needs fixing. Something was implanted in you when you perhaps were a baby. Like there's a lot that I've learned that may have happened in my birth, in the birth canal, how my mother held me in with her very strong thigh muscles, so that she didn't give birth in a cab, and she waited till she got to the hospital. And so, that there's been this stuff that's come up in work I've done that said, well, I was deeply traumatized during that time that I was being held in. I felt that I was suffocating. I felt that I was going to die. And so the rest of my life, I have hesitated to step onto the stage of the world because I feel this incredible thing that said, if you try to be born, you may be held back, and you will be held back, and that it'll be very difficult for you to manifest. And so there's things like that. And I'm noticing in this relationship I'm in now that I'm doing things that don't make sense with this woman. I'm acting incredibly in love with her, and then I'm acting like I want to run away from her. And going through that back and forth for her is a little bit crazy making. And I don't want to do that to her. I don't want to do it to me. And so I go, well, gee, what's the unconscious, subconscious thing that's causing me to act this way? And so being a law of attraction coach and claiming that I'm mastering this topic of the law of attraction, I showed up at her house the other day, sure that I was going to be able to use law of attraction to have a wonderful evening where I didn't allow the things that were my doubts, my fears, my vague wonderings about the relationship to really dominate the evening and become a crazy making thing where I'd act really sweet and then I would be, at odds with her. And I managed to spend the whole evening in exquisite celebration because I used law of attraction very successfully to notice my thoughts and to always turn towards the better feeling thought. So I was always able throughout the whole evening to, in fact, I got on such a roll and so much momentum. There's this thing that I want to read you that Abraham says about this. And they said, let's see, how do they put it?
Well, I can do a little promo while you're trying to find the
yeah.
Because I've been meaning to say this anyway. Obviously, we're into something pretty deep here and pretty cool, but most of the time what we're doing is also laced with a lot of fun, and that's why we call it your daily dose of happy. So one thing that we want people to do who are new to us is to take a moment and subscribe. We're getting a lot of new people visiting, and so we're encouraging everybody to get that free subscription to the podcast so that you can get all of our podcast episodes delivered directly to your smartphone so you can play them whenever you want to. And that's what people do. We know on average they play 30 to 45 episodes a month. And, so people are definitely into it and they're getting value out of it. And we encourage you, if you're new to us, to do the same thing, kind of join the club. It's really easy to do. Just go to the homepage, loatoday.net. All the instructions are right there. It takes about a minute to do. And when you're done, just that quick. And then you can just click one of the social media buttons and say, hey, I just subscribed to LOA Today. We hope that you'll do the same thing. So, take a moment. If you haven't done it yet, take a moment and subscribe and join the club, because we have, I've said this before, we have the best listeners in the world. I don't care what podcast you're talking about. I don't care what radio show, TV show, whatever. We have the best listeners in the world, and we want you to be one of them. So thank you for your support.
Yeah, and we're going to be happy today. Well, it's really up to each one of us to be happy. So, if this subject matter, wherever it takes our listeners and wherever it takes you and me, that's where it takes us. And I think, though, that what the intention is of this podcast is to see how to more be able to dance with this question, with this topic, how to finesse it with law of attraction. And here's the part I was going to read. They say that nothing is more exhilarating in all the world than to have taken all the subjects that are important to you and have practiced them into alignment, so that now your mind can be fully active and fully aligned at the same time. In other words, you're running on all cylinders. When you're tuned in, tapped in, turned on, and you're alert, and source energy is flowing through you, and you're focused upon things and you're in alignment with them, that's the best of all worlds. That's like riding on the crest of the wave on your surfboard, the wave constantly coming up and carrying you and carrying you. Nothing is more exhilarating than that. Now, that's what I experienced the other night when I went to see my friend, is that I was able to take anything that was a doubt about the relationship, a doubt about my being able to spend that time with her and be in a very aligned place with my source self. And I was able to stay aligned. And it was really like riding on a wave. And I used to be a surfer. I know what it's like to ride on a wave, to ride on that exact place. It's an exhilarating feeling. It's an incredible feeling, because you don't know how that's happening in a way. How is this happening? This wave is carrying me like this.
And props to you, because you were able to pull it off. From what you were describing, it sounds like there were times where you could have kind of fallen off the wave, so to speak, and you just stayed up there. You stayed in that high-flying place. That's great. Congratulations. Pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, thank you. And then a couple nights later, I didn't. A couple nights later, I went in there and immediately fell off the surfboard, and then managed to kind of stay off it most of the evening. And and that vastly affected the relationship too. Whereas the time before, it propelled the relationship towards a really high, wonderful place. And then the next time, it really took the relationship to a really low place. And I just see how I'm creating this stuff. It isn't that I'm the victim of my unconscious self, but boy, it can seem like that. And it did seem like that the second time, because it seemed like, why would I walk into her place and create that situation? And what Abraham says about it, what I'm noticing, it's that we do what we do because of what we're deciding to think about and what we're deciding to focus on. And what that dominant vibration is in me is what's going to produce that evening, and unless I change the vibration, then it'll be the dominant vibration of the evening. And so there was just an example of these two extremes there. And of course, that made me, want to turn to psychotherapy in a sense, because I wanted to understand, why do I do this? Why do I have these two worlds that I bring to her, to bring to this relationship? Because it's not fun to go through one extreme and then another extreme.
Yeah.
I'd like to be able to be a master of deciding, what I'm going to bring there. There's this thing that the Native Americans talk about, and I know I probably mentioned this on other podcasts, but it's called the grief basket. And there's this basket. Did you remember me explaining this? There's this basket that Native Americans of some tribes use, that the women, would go out and they would collect little pieces of wood to make the fire that was going to be inside the teepee or inside the lodge. And where they live, and yet they want to use these very small sticks because they get less smoke. So they get a whole bunch of really small sticks, and then they can build the fire, say, under the teepee hole, and the smoke will go up through the hole, and they won't get the whole place full of smoke. So they have this basket that they go out and collect these little sticks in, that hangs over their back. They come back to the teepee or to the lodge, and they take the sticks out and they hang the bag on the outside of the lodge right by the door. Now, this came to be known as the grief basket, because when a person would come to visit that family, it was understood that as you pass the grief basket, you put into it, you stop and pause, put into it all the concerns that you have about your own life, about your own grief, about your own worry and struggle and anxiety or whatever. Put it into the grief basket so that you can enter this person's house and spend the evening having dinner with them, or having conversation, and you're not going to bring your grief to them. You're not going to bring it into their lodge, into their home. And I realize that's the law of attraction in action right there. It's like we have a choice all the time about what we're going to bring into our own lives and into the lives of others. And I feel like that the trick to this whole thing is to get so up to speed with noticing what I'm creating with my thoughts that I don't act in a, what you might say, a clumsy way about it. I don't be, what's the word that I've heard used to describe it? You don't be sloppy in your thinking, that I think is a huge key to successful transformation and moving forward in one's life. And the way we want to create our lives is to ask ourselves, what's the thoughts I'm having about this particular thing that's coming up for me? What's the thoughts that I don't want? And what's the thoughts I do want? And am I really putting the focus on the thoughts that I want? Am I putting the focus on the feelings that I want?
Well, I think those are valid questions. I think there's also something else here, too, which is we've been kind of, during this discussion, treating therapy and the law of attraction as if they're mutually exclusive. And of course, they really aren't. There's actually quite a bit of overlap. I mean, there are certain differences for sure, but there is overlap. And one of the areas of overlap is that therapy tries to delve down and identify stuff from our past that gets in our way. And study of the law of attraction, particularly with Abraham, focuses heavily on learning the art of allowing, which means letting go of resistance, which means identifying the resistance so you can let go of it. Well, that's a pretty strong overlap right there. In order to delve into it from a psychotherapy point of view, what you're really doing is you're trying to identify what's blocking me, what's getting in my way. And when you're looking at it from the art of allowing point of view, you're really asking, what's blocking me? What's in my way? It's the same question. It's just taken from a different perspective. So really, there's nothing wrong at all that I can see. And I'm not sure exactly how Wendy Dillard would say this, but this is a point that she would make, which is it's actually a good thing to look at stuff like that. It's not like you're going to live in that vibration. If you're going to live in that vibration, that really negative place that you're looking at, trying to understand what it is that you just keep blocking yourself with over and over again, well, obviously that's going to cause you a problem. But there's nothing wrong with just taking some time to look at it and study it and play with it and kind of get a feel for what it is so that you can unearth it. And once you've unearthed it, then you can take the charge away from it. And once you take the charge away from it, then you can release it. Well, that's releasing resistance right there. That's exactly what that is. So, I think that's the first point I would make is I wouldn't worry about the fact that we're looking at stuff that's uncomfortable, because that uncomfortable stuff apparently is stuff you need to bring up and get out of the way. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think for me the question just is, what you vibrate with, you attract more of into your life. And as I look at certain things, and try to then go back and discover the cause, like let's say a psychotherapist wants to help me go back and find out what happened, at my birth, or I had a guy work with me, and he did a regression. He did muscle testing, and then he took me back to a time, and he said, "Well, what age are you at now?" And I said, "I'm 2." And then he says, "Well, what's going on?" And I said, "Well, my mother's in the kitchen and she's wailing and crying and completely freaked out, and I'm laying on the living room floor on the hardwood, and I'm having the realization that my mother can't really give me what I need. She
Mm-hmm.
can't take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was this kind of big revelation, because I've never gone to when I was 2 years old before. I don't have any memories of that time, but because this regression happened, it was sort of like hypnosis type regression.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I experienced. And it kind of showed me a whole lot about my life. Now, I guess the thing that I'm most concerned about in this whole realm of psychotherapy is really what's the value of going deep into these wounded places and digging them up. And but I guess I agree with you that I do think that there's something there. Otherwise I wouldn't, I guess, bring this topic up, and I wouldn't be so interested in it.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
mean it's clearly a point of resistance of some kind.
yeah, there's some things that happen in our lives that we wonder why we repeat certain patterns over and over and over again. And from the point of view of law of attraction, the way I understand it, you always ask yourself in the present moment, what thoughts have precipitated this right now? In other words, I'm running a stream of thoughts about my relationship with this woman I'm with, and those thoughts are affecting what I show up with when I'm with her. And to the degree that I'm not resolved about those thoughts, like I really love this about her, but I don't like this so much. And if I have that dichotomy going on in me and I haven't found a way to deal with that, then it can become an issue. Um,
Well, there's also something else that Abraham says that comes to my mind that might be helpful, which is whenever we talk about somebody else and we talk about their behavior, we talk about stuff that we like, stuff that we don't like about them, and so on and so forth. Almost inevitably, what we're really doing is talking about ourselves
yes,
on
yes,
some level.
yeah,
So that might be like the first place to start in terms of trying to kind of get the root of whatever this resistance is that's going on inside of you. It's just starting with just that basic thing. When I'm saying that there's something about her that I'm not liking, what is it really that I'm saying about me?
right. And sometimes it's also about the thing that I'm unwilling to give myself.
Yeah,
Um,
sure, could be.
in terms of allowing myself to have something that I really desire, but I'm repressing it in order to try to please the other person. Like, okay, I'll forego this. It's sort of like compromising, like
Mm-hmm.
how I know Abraham said so many times, you can't compromise in a relationship. And that's pretty radical thing to say in
I
this day
agree
and
with it actually. That's one of the things that it's not. I wouldn't have said that you shouldn't. I would have said that it's not necessary, because that's pretty much what Louise and I found. I mean, I had heard all my life you have to compromise. You have to work on the relationship. You have to be willing
Mhm.
to compromise. You have to do all these things in order to keep the relationship going. And then Louise and I got together and we found none of it was true.
Mhm.
We rarely have to compromise on anything, and mostly it isn't even compromise. Mostly it's, well, what do you like? Well, I like this. What do you like? Well, I like this. Well, where's the overlap? There it is. Okay, let's go with that. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
not even compromise. That's just like finding where do we agree?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I mean, I buy into the idea completely. I understand other people have trouble with it. I've heard it all the time throughout my lifetime, but I think they're barking up the wrong tree. I really believe that when someone is feeling like they have to compromise, what again, it comes back to that Abraham idea that whenever you're pointing your finger at somebody else, you're really pointing it at yourself. There's something going on
Mhm.
inside yourself that you don't like so much, and you're projecting it onto them. And I think that's where compromise desires and drives come from. An unrecognized connection between, I don't like what you're saying, but I'm really not liking what's going on inside of me, and I'm projecting it as if I don't like what you're saying.
Mhm. Well, I like the thing you said that psychotherapy and law of attraction are not mutually exclusive. I know I was watching some videos or audios and videos of Abraham last night about this, and there's one where a psychotherapist has a discussion with Abraham for quite a lengthy discussion, the thing that this psychotherapist is saying is that they can't believe it, but they've become a law of attraction psychotherapist, even though their whole background was traditional psychotherapy. But they found by, their interest in law of attraction that now they're using it with their client. This is the guy who's using it with his client constantly.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so yeah, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive, and I would never think they are. And I would guarantee that there's thousands and thousands of psychotherapists who are successful because they use the law of attraction, even though they wouldn't call it that, wouldn't even know that that's what they're doing.
True.
But
Yeah.
they're simply helping their clients to see a way to get into a vibration eventually of once they maybe have looked at this deep traumatic wound that they had from childhood or something, and they've been able to sort of take it apart and look at it, and then be able to then make choices going forward. Apparently, like releasing some of the charge they had about why they keep that thing in the shadows, why that's been, why there's been a terror there, a fear of something that came from childhood, and that gets released, and then the whole thing becomes making choices in the present moment over and over again. It's like my friend who's a psychotherapist said to me, you're often going to be dealing with these things for the rest of our lives because they had such an impact on us when we were very small. But the fact of the matter is we can deal with them, and we can, I think we get in the habit of making choices, and that's the law of attraction. You continually make choices that are for your joy, that are for your happiness, that are for your ease, for your fun, for your playfulness. You're opening your heart to your life being a successful adventure, rather than a painful, looping back into that pain all the time. And you just start realizing, I don't have to go back there. I don't have to go to that thing. Now I know what it is.
That's really the distinction, I think. I mean, Joel Elston, who actually is both a therapist and a law of attraction coach, he told me yesterday, while he has both trainings and he has had licensing and so forth, he also realized he had to decide on one or the other. And so he basically now does not retain his licensing for being a therapist. He has now become strictly a life coach. And his reason was, as much as there is a lot of overlap, in his words, it would almost be malpractice to continue to be a therapist and to promote law of attraction teaching at the same time, just because there is a certain conflict between the two. And the conflict is essentially like what you just described. Therapy is all about delving into the past. Life coaching and law of attraction coaching is all about the present and the future. They're two different perspectives. So bringing one to the other would be a little bit dishonest in a sense, and certainly within the realm of the current way that psychotherapy is practiced, there'd probably be a lot of pushback among the mainstream therapists if you were to try to do something like that. But by the same token, like you said, there are a lot of life coaches who incorporate law of attraction in their coaching, and many of them are doing it consciously now. I mean, you can go on to was it Psychology Today's website, and they offer a service to people who are in that field to have a page on their site and promote their services and so forth. And you can just find lots and lots of people who have therapeutic backgrounds. Maybe they're social workers, maybe they're psychologists, maybe they're family therapists, and you can also see that they've identified themselves as life coaches. So they're straddling the divide, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's a lot less of a divide than perhaps a mainstream therapist would allow, but it's still there isn't that much of a divide, and I guess it depends on what we want to focus on. Do we want to focus on the areas where they strictly disagree, or do we want to focus on the areas of agreement? I think there's a lot more to be gained from the areas of agreement myself.
Yeah. Well, you got to imagine that in the world of psychology today, that if you go to a university and you study it, that because positive psychology is becoming a whole new arm of psychology, that, and you've got transpersonal psychology, you've got so many different forms now. We have Naropa Institute here in Boulder, and it's a Buddhist college, and it focuses tremendously on Buddhist psychotherapy, like looking at things from the eyes of Buddhism and mindfulness and transpersonal. I mean, all these things are all these different nuanced ways of understanding psychology and understanding why we do the things we do. And but that positive psychology stuff is, in a way, you could say it's diametrically opposed to the old paradigm of dysfunction. You know, everything looked at from eyes of dysfunction.
Oh yeah, it's shaking up
And
the
yeah,
entire psychological field for sure.
for sure. But I bet you there's many psychologists who are straddling that divide very
Of
successfully.
course. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Finding how to use them both. And so I feel like as a life coach that's what I'm trying to do, and it's what I'm trying to do with my own life. You know, like
Hmm.
and you know what? One thing that I noticed with Abraham and the whole question of the law of attraction dialogue around this topic is a lot of it comes down to emotion, you know, and emotion being our guidance system.
Sure.
And so then it's like it's a different game when you start. Like I noticed that with how I was able to ride the crest of the wave in that evening with my friend the other
Hmm.
night was the fact that I really know I had a very finely tuned ability to notice when I was at all going in a direction that didn't feel good, and I would turn it towards a direction that felt good. And even in her conversation, in topics that previously, when she would go in certain directions, would push buttons for me and make me get, you know, turned off to where she was going with certain aspects of the conversation, I was able to turn those things again and again and again towards the positive and actually produce a great deal of laughter and fun about the topics that she was bringing up, which before were bringing me a lot of angst. Um, and finding that it was really like that thing of riding the wave of just continually feeling for the good emotion, feeling for the good emotion, feeling for the good emotion.
Hmm.
And I think that's a choice that I want to get better and better at making, instead of having really to always know the root underlying cause, but always turning, you know, becoming a master of turning it towards what feels good, what feels good, what feels good. Um,
Well, it
so
makes
what do you think?
sense. Well, yeah, I
Hmm?
mean, it makes sense, and I mean, like we said before, the really good thing is that you were able, particularly on that first night, despite having a number of slings and arrows apparently thrown at you. Well, not so much slings. I guess you don't really throw a sling, do you?
And you know, she's probably not throwing anything at me. It's how I'm perceiving it.
Well,
Yeah.
that's where I was going with it. Yeah, I think that's the real question. That's probably what you need to explore, in your mind at some point. What is it that she is waking up in you that is uncomfortable and that is encouraging you to either project onto her or to get upset or to do something that produces behavior and reaction in you that you don't like? There's something
Yeah.
going on there, and whatever that thing is, once you kind of take it out and look it over a little bit, kind of turn it over in your hand, play with it a little bit, what should happen and what will likely happen is that it will discharge just in the process of doing that. The charge will reduce because you're bringing it out into the light of day. And when you do that,
Mhm.
that basically is how that's a very great way to release resistance. Because clearly it's a big form of resistance. You're trying to release it. So, why not bring it out so you can release it? I think it's a good thing.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So always whatever the negative emotion is, there's some thought that's been there, you know, either within the last few seconds or the last few minutes or the last few hours, or something that I've been harboring, or just simply noticing in that moment that is that's precipitating a reaction in me um, that then I could learn to notice that thing before it turns into a bigger thing. You know, before I give it so much weight that then it's a painful thing.
And even
Uh,
if it did turn into a painful thing, even if it did go too far, so to speak,
uh,
the process still works. I mean, it may be a little bit harder to do, but the process still works. It's not like you don't have any way to get around it at that point. You can still pull it out, take a look at it, play with it, and discharge it. It may
yeah.
take a little bit more to do that, a little bit more attention to it to do that just because you built up so much momentum about it. But I mean, it really, as Abraham has pointed out, it really doesn't matter how much momentum you build up about anything. Once you change your thought and your perspective, you change your likelihood of attracting more like it. And the same thing is going to be true here. I mean, yeah, perhaps maybe you are building up some momentum over it. Maybe you are building it up to a large level, but it doesn't matter because once you go through the process of pulling it out, examining it, and releasing it, you don't need to focus on it anymore. And the momentum can reverse. It may take a little bit longer if you've got a lot built up, but it can and it will reverse if you do that. So, I personally, I wouldn't get worked up too much one way or another about how much momentum is built up. Just, okay, if it's there, it's there. If it's not, great. I mean, certainly it's better to catch it early. I'll definitely agree with that. I think we both agree on that, for sure.
Well, I build it up to the point that it starts to be in my body, like it starts to feel like a knot in the pit of my stomach. And it literally affects digestion. It affects eating. It affects conversation. It affects everything because there's this part of me that says, I'm in terror, or, it's sort of like the fight or flight or flee,
Sure.
Or freeze reaction. It's like getting into that place. And then, it becomes difficult to then unravel it. So it's really important that when I start feeling an emotion that feels at all negative, it's like, well, one of the podcasts we talked about the subconscious and the unconscious, and one way to deal with it is to ask why is this coming up now? And then if there's a negative emotion, say, well, what is source? The negative emotion is saying that source doesn't agree with the way that I'm seeing it.
Or more precisely, that we don't agree with source. Because source is always looking at us from the most positive, supportive aspect that you can do it. We're actually the ones who are in disagreement when we feel bad. We're saying, no, it's not the best possible thing. I'm going to look at the less positive thing. I'm going to look at the negative thing.
Yeah. So to be able to like ask, I mean, that's why they say to ask this question, why this now? Why would I be feeling this feeling right now? Why would this emotion be coming up? And then we can see how does source see this right now? And I love the fact that source, like one of the things that helped me so much is to recognize that I don't want to expect this woman to bring me happiness. I don't want to lay on her the expectation that unless she thinks and acts in a certain way, I can't be happy. That's a huge one right there for me.
Sure. Yeah.
And knowing that source only sees her as complete and beautiful and totally radiant, in the eyes of source. And so then, what is it that I'm doing where I would see her otherwise, or even to see myself otherwise, as somehow wounded, like source doesn't see me as wounded. Source doesn't see me as carrying a big trauma from my past that's sabotaging me here and sabotaging me there. That's not how source sees it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And so to see things through the eyes of source is always an option. And the emotion is there to simply guide us back towards that. Mm-hmm. And so I find that my life now is such in every aspect of my life, I'm always looking at what I'm feeling and seeing if I'm starting to get off, well, wait a minute, why am I starting to feel off? Why am I starting to feel bad?
Mm-hmm. And that speaks well to your training and also to your desire. You have a very strong desire, and very similar to one I have, that is driving you to say, you know what, the moment that I notice that I'm heading in the wrong direction, I want to reverse it now, because it's so much easier to reverse it now than it is to reverse it later on. Not that I can't reverse it later on, it's just I don't want to have to put up with that. I'd rather reverse it now when it's easy. That speaks really highly of you.
Well, thank you, Walt.
It does.
Yes. No, it's just how I want to be. I mean, I want to be happy. I mean, to me, I think we all just want to be happy. I was talking with this guy who listens a lot to the news and television, and he was hearing me explain how I don't, and it was really interesting because he started to probe into the fact of, well, so you actually have been keeping yourself a lot happier by not watching them, And I said, yeah, and so, but during the time we were having dinner together, he probed into that a number of times because it was so intriguing to him, I think, because he realized how much pain he has in his life because of how much he watches the news and listens to the news. And
what a great self-discovery that is. That's fabulous.
yeah. And it reminded me of this thing that Esther said, about, Esther Hicks, who translates Abraham. She said that she has this one particular show she likes to watch on television. And I may have mentioned this in another podcast, but she loves this show, and she loves the talk show host, and she watches it and she laughs, and it's entertaining, but then every once in a while the host will bring on a guest that she knows that guest is going to take it in a direction that is not positive and not hopeful, and is sort of, a downer. Mm-hmm. And so she says she'll be going along having a great old time watching that show, but as soon as she hears that so-and-so is coming on in 1 minute, she'll just turn the
thing off, right? I don't blame her. I do the same thing.
She might turn it on back later and try it again, see who's on now. But so that's the way that I think I have to be, that the way I want to be in my life is like when the thoughts come that are off, alignment. They're not, they're feeling bad, they're a bad feeling emotion. Then it's like, it's a way for me to go, what thought am I having that I can look at here that I don't really, that's taking me in this direction. And then just like, look at that thought and say, what is about that thought that is, producing this negative emotion? And that's a tricky thing. I mean, I feel like it's quite a game, like you say, to learn to play that masterfully.
Yeah.
It's really what I'm doing with my clients constantly, and what I'm doing with my own life is what are you doing that is, when do you start getting off? When do you start going down that road where that fear starts to grow, or that doubt starts to grow, or that anger starts to grow, and so how can you not feed those thoughts? How can you make a choice that you no longer need those thoughts, and that there's another way to write a new, better feeling story about this? I think that's a huge thing about law of attraction is, can you write a better feeling story and believe in that better feeling story so that it really is what you want, and you no longer want the story where, you're split in this dichotomy of, well, half of the time I pick up the stick from the end I don't want, half of the time I pick up the stick from the end I do want, and that's just what I do, and my life goes back and forth like a roller coaster. And wait a minute, that's a story you're telling. What about, you start to pick up the stick on the end that you want more and more and more? How do you do that?
Well, the way you describe, that's how you do it.
Yeah. But I'm just looking at it in terms of this relationship I'm in, it's very interesting to feel like certain things are not right. And so how do I pick up this end of the stick of, well, what would make it right? What's a way to see this, and without having to completely just abandon the relationship,
Yeah, I don't think you have to abandon the relationship at all. I mean, obviously you do whatever you feel is going to be in your best interest, because that's how you achieve the joy that you're looking for, but that we're all looking for. But nevertheless, I mean, I really do believe it comes down to recognizing that anything that you're seeing in the other person that you don't like, you're really just seeing something similar, something related in yourself. So it's just about unearthing whatever that thing is. Now, I say just. There are numerous things that I'm sure I have not been able to unearth yet, despite every effort that I've made to do so. And yet I can also say that very often I don't even know what to do. Very often I have inferred through, or even deducted through deductive reasoning that because of how I'm feeling, there must be a block there. Where's the block? I have no idea, but it's got to be there.
Yeah.
So how do I get at it? Well, I'm not really sure. And that's where you kind of tie yourself into, connecting to your inner being, getting getting feedback from others, just drawing in as much data as you can from all the best relevant sources, so you can kind of deduce, well, where is this block? What does it look like? How does it manifest? How does it show up in my life? Until finally you see enough of a pattern that you recognize, oh, there it is. And now you can take it out and look at it.
Yeah. And that's what psychotherapy claims to do. I mean, they help you look and look and look again, I guess, until you see how you're creating that pattern and then where it came from. I guess, you want to see, this clearly came from the way my relationship was with my mother. I'm doing the same thing with this woman. I'm repeating this pattern that I had with my mother from the time I was in the birth canal. It's like I was held in at birth, and therefore I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I guess it's all valuable.
It's perfectly in alignment with LOA, because that is learning how to identify and release resistance, which is exactly what Abraham says is our main challenge in this lifetime. I don't remember exactly where they said it, but I know I either read or heard in one of the workshop recordings how we humans we're really good at the asking part. We got the ask part down pretty good, and we're even getting better and better at the believe part. But where we have the biggest challenge is in the allowing part. Letting it in, stop resisting.
Yes. Yes.
So
that's really
so what you're working on here is exactly what Abraham says you should be working on.
Yeah. Releasing
which
resistance.
I think is encouraging.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The whole thing is, I mean, I like the thing that Abraham says, which is that you're never in the wrong place on your path. You're always in the right place, and whatever is happening is exactly what needs to be happening. What you've created actually to be happening at this time. I mean, if I attract a certain partner into my life, it's exactly the person that I need to be with right now.
Yeah.
And she might not be the person to be with a week from now or 10 years from now, but she might be. She might, because there's always, like they say, there's nobody that shows up in your life, like especially like a partner, who doesn't get an engraved invitation to be there from the universe. And so, this woman is in my life for all the right reasons. And now it's for me to find that, okay, I'm not a victim of anything here. This is all there's something beautiful in all of this, and it's going to show me about releasing resistance. Relationships really put a magnifying glass on where the resistances are, right? I think they do.
Mm-hmm. And as you half quoted Abraham saying, you can't get it wrong and you'll never get it done. Or as I like to always turn it to the positive inverted side. So you're always right and the road goes on forever. Well, that's kind of encouraging, It means that, first of all, we don't have to beat ourselves up whenever we, quote, get it wrong, unquote, because we never really get it wrong. We just find another way. It's like Thomas Edison finding yet another way to not invent an electric light bulb. It's not bad. It's not like we did something wrong. It's just, nope, that one doesn't work. We'll go on to the next one. And I think the same thing is true with our experiences with, identifying what our resistances are and learning how to be better allowers and really turning that into a high level skill. Because I mean, that's really where the nirvana is. When you combine being an allower with being in a high vibration, that's where it all happens. That's where all the mana comes from, right?
Yeah. Being an allower, that's definitely, man, that's the whole thing.
It is. Yeah.
Allowing to let in what's in our vortex. I mean, that's one thing that helped me so much in this relationship, is that I realized that I have the ideal relationship is in my vortex, and I've been putting it in there for maybe centuries, I mean, whatever, forever, this ideal relationship. But definitely in this lifetime, I've certainly had a lot of ideas about what an ideal relationship would be like. And so on some level, I'm allowing that in, I'm allowing that to happen. And it's just a question of how much more can I allow it? And it's always comes down to me. I realized this was the night that I showed up at my friend's place and felt so much like I was riding the wave and so joyful and able to turn any situation into bliss, was because I so much felt like the ideal relationship is right here. There's no reason why it can't be right here, right now. And all I need to do is be in a place of relaxing and allowing myself to see how ideal whatever was happening could be, that it was up to me to just allow it. and not resist the fact that the universe has got my back, that the universe, the source wants me to have a beautiful relationship. Source wants me to have things the way that I really enjoy them. So for me, it was like, just look for that enjoyment, allow that enjoyment to be there. And boy, so much enjoyment was there.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't make sense why I couldn't go recreate that the other night after that. That was the interesting thing. Like, why would I then bring in the opposite of that? Forget all that, forget that this could be a beautiful, beautiful thing. I mean, I wanted it to be that way, but I wasn't able to get there. Instead, getting stuck on the negative emotion and feeling like I'm the victim of my own negative emotion, and I don't know what to do about it, and therefore, I'll try to sidestep it, but I wasn't able to.
And yet, of course, even that wasn't anything that you did wrong, because we can't get it wrong. There's just no way to get it wrong. So you just found yet another way not to produce a happy relationship. That's all.
Yeah, just another way to convince myself that I'm somehow a victim of my own, of my own programming and stuff, and therefore it lies in this mystery world of the shadow. Like I must have some really deep repressed things in my shadow self, and that I don't understand. But in a lot of ways,
it may not be that complex. It may actually be something a lot simpler than that.
Well, and in a lot of ways, it's just a matter of one night I was a master of it, the next night I wasn't. Why? Why was I a master one night and not so much the other night? And that's a fascinating question to me.
Do you have any insights about that? Has anything occurred to you about that?
Well, I definitely couldn't get my mind off the focus about the negative aspects. In other words, I walked into her place thinking about the negative aspects somehow. I was holding them with sort of a feeling like these negative things have to have a voice, and I wasn't, so then I gave them a voice. And because there's a sense sometimes of repressing, things, and it's a different. I realized the first night when I was riding the wave that I wasn't repressing anything. I was just finessing everything. I was taking whatever came up and turning lemons into lemonade,
Mm-hmm.
Even though there wasn't that many lemons, there was a lot of wonderful, wonderful beauty. And that the second time it was just like all lemons with no sweetener, it was like,
Is that like the hellish version of lemonade?
Yeah, lemons with
no sugar.
Yeah, that is the hellish version. So no, I don't really understand it. In fact, if that's the biggest question I have today, which is like, how do I understand this in a deeper way? And part of me says, well, I need psychotherapy. I need somebody who can help me go into.
You've already started the process, though. I mean, right here, you've started the process during the show today of trying to explore and poke at it and so forth. And it doesn't matter whether you actually broke through today. If you keep doing that, you're going to break through. You're going to find it. You don't necessarily have to go into deep regression in order to do it. Chances are you're just going to find it just by probing at it. And it's just a question of how long it takes you to find it, but you'll find it.
And I wonder if it doesn't, it's not just always happening moment by moment. I mean, it's like, it's always a moment by moment where we go with our thinking, right? And when the feeling comes up that's bad, where do you go with your thinking? Yeah. Anyway, it's an ongoing journey, that's for sure.
It sure is, yeah. And our journey continues to go on as well because, we've been through another week. I've got one more podcast with Wendy this afternoon, and then our double daily dose of Happy for the Week is done. But then we pick it up again next week, and that's what makes it great again. Tom, before we leave, even though you, like everybody, you have your own stuff to work on, you're still really good at helping other people. If someone else wants a little help, how do they reach out to you?
They can go to my website, which is called youarejoy.com, and that's the three words, youarejoy.com. And I offer a free 1-hour consultation with me, a coaching session where you can bring any issue that you'd like to work on, and then after that, you can decide if you want to work with me or not, with no pressure.
Sounds great.
Okay.
So, all right. Well, we'll be talking again on Monday. Have a great weekend, Tom. We'll talk to you then.
Yeah, you too, Walt. Thanks so much.
And we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.